You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
Welcome to the Grape Nation, your weekly wine journey. Our guests are Jeff Porter and Raj Vaidya. We'll talk to Jeff and Raj about wine, Convivio del Vino, and more. We'll taste the wine from Chiara Condello and attendee at Convivio del Vino for our weekly wine sip. I'm your host, Sam Ben-Ruby. Stay with us for the Grape Nation on the Heritage Radio Network. We bring wine to the people. Texas-born Jeff Porter and Jersey boy Raj Vaidya have spent over 4 decades in wine and hospitality. Jeff at Treviña, Babbo, Del Posto, Raj at Garidanco, Per Se, and over a decade at Danielle, to name a few. Jeff went on to consult while Raj joined Pressoir, responsible for La Paulée, La Fête du Champagne, La Table, Pressoir events, and now with Jeff Porter, Convivio del Vino. Jeff currently resides, I forgot to double check this with you, in Turin, Italy, where Raj is based out of New York. Convivio del Vino, coming up the end of April, is an Italian wine fair dedicated to a curated list of winemakers from historic family estates to a new generation of growers. The inaugural Convivio del Vino will feature over 30 winemakers pouring about 150 wines, including themed dinners during the week. Welcome back to the Grape Nation, Jeff and Raj.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
So excited to be here.
We're talking to Jeff and Raj online, and I'll explain why we're doing that, via our Zencaster app. So let's just sort things out for a second. So first of all, Raj, where are you?
I am at my favorite low-cost hotel, the Ibis Style, on the périphérique of Beaune, France, in Burgundy. The sunny afternoon in Burgundy.
That's nice. Now, why are you in Burgundy as we speak?
I'm here to chat with a few producers, kind of a decompression post La Paulée, our Burgundy festival that wrapped about a month and a half ago, and also to discuss the future of the wine business with a handful of the producers here. We have an upcoming additional Paulée after Convivio del Vino here in France with the Trois Gros family. And so we're also tying together the last few loose ends of that. And Daniel, my business partner and the founder of La Paulée and La Fête du Champagne and Table, and co-founder of Convivio del Vino, along with Jeff. He actually was with me all week. He's now headed on a train back towards Paris to head home tomorrow, and I'll be heading home on the weekend.
Nice. Now, Jeff, where are you?
I am in Torino. I got back like 15 minutes ago. I was in Barbaresco for an event and got here. Yeah, I live here now full time, and it's also a beautiful day here in this beautiful city that used to be the former capital of Italy.
I guess it's a nice day in Europe if both of you guys are saying that. Now, Jeff, you mentioned off air you were at Vin Italy like as soon as yesterday, right?
I got back last night, correct? Yeah, 5 days of intense insanity.
Yeah, I didn't realize you were there for 5 days. So you're now living in Italy. How long have you been there?
15 months.
Okay, so 2 things. What have you been doing the past few years? I guess you just explained some of it. And you know, why did you decide to go to Italy? Is it something you thought you had to do to be where you wanted to be? You took a shot? Tell me about that.
So after, when we spoke last, I was working with Billy Durney and consulting for Red Hook Tavern and all of his work. And then simultaneously, I used to have an import distribution company called Volcanic Selections, and I just couldn't get that off the ground, and so I closed it down in late 2021, and I got hired by the the Brooklyn Nets to run the wine program at the Barclays Center and open their first private club called Crown Club.
Right.
And so I did that from September 2021 until the end of 2023. And in that time, I was just, I've been like, just Italy's been my passion. That's where I've always wanted to be. And I decided that with my family to take the leap and move here to kind of further my career in terms of learning the language, to be in touch with more producers. And I also started working with Wine Enthusiast as their Northern Italian wine reviewer. And
I forgot about that. Yeah.
Wine staff. So being here on the ground, I kind of get to have the pulse of what's going on here in Italy. And we just did it. We got the visas and we came over a little over a year ago. It's been an amazing experience. It's been hard, but it's been amazing.
Is it open-ended how long you're going to stay there?
It is, yes.
Okay.
Thank God.
Last thing, and then we'll get into a bunch of stuff. I mean, you guys have been slinging wine literally, combined for decades. Jeff, with you, I'm just curious, Texas guy, New York, jumped around. You were in California. When and where specifically did this, love of Italian wines,
It started early on when I was at Central Market in Texas, when I was just a box boy at this fine wine retail store. And I remember tasting a 77 Master Berardino Radici Tarazi and being like, what the hell is this?
That's an interesting one.
Yeah, at age 21, like that it was just a really like lightning bolt. And then when I got my first gig as a sommelier, it was in St. Helena in Trevigna, and it was like 50% California, 50% Italian wine. And the Italians, like, that's where I met Luca Carrata of Vietti, then now of Cascina Penna Carrata. That's where I met Pio Boffa of Pio Cesare, Angelo Gaia. I met all these people in the early 2000s, and just their hospitality, their warmth of spirit, their conviviality just made me enthralled with the culture and the community. And I decided to dedicate my life to those wines.
So all of that you described resonated more than any other country, region, type, I guess?
100%. I mean, the very first wine region I ever went to was Champagne, and I love Champagne to this day. I drink bucket loads of it. But I think there was something in between the connection of like kind of the Texas form of hospitality of just like big open doors, lots of food, sitting down for a long time, talking, that really resonated with Italy when I first went to Italy the first time in 2006. And it really took over my life. The way I approached living became much more in that spirit of Italianity.
Yeah.
That's what we'll call that.
You made
I love it. If I could interrupt for 1 second to say two things. You're going to get used to Jeff making up words for the rest of this podcast.
Oh, boy.
Italianity. And secondly, there's nothing more Italian than drinking tons of champagne. That's like the most Italian pastime.
There you go. Raj, remember I said, I try not to edit the show. I may have to edit all Jeff's uninformed words, not to confuse my listeners. All right, so let me move on. While I have you, before we talk about Convivio, listen, you guys truly represent, global wine people. I mean, Jeff, you're living in Italy. Raj, nobody goes back and forth, travels, whether it's scholarship, for Champagne, for Poulet, all that, than you guys. I want to talk about something that's kind of a hot button today and get your take on it, and that's the effects of the Trump tariffs. Albeit it's not going to settle into that 200% that he threatened, but 20%. But, now we're even on a pause. So think about your guys, and in a way you come together, but you have different wine circles. What effect will this have on your wine circles? And this includes the growers, which is really on the table now because Convivio is about the growers, importers, distributors, our retail and restaurant friends, and your own businesses, in that sense. Do you worry about the effects? Do you think it won't be as bad? Just give me a little POV. Raj, you start.
Okay. Well, definitely it is bad. Tariffs are they simply don't work. The conception is that if they're blanket tariffs of any kind or if they're specific retaliatory tariffs, as we've experienced in the last time Trump was in office, and then in the whirlwind and roller coaster that's been the last 3 weeks, they do not have the effect of making anybody move production and labor-intensive activities to the U.S. They also don't help American wineries. If European wineries become more expensive, what that does is it makes it harder for distributors in the three-tier system in various markets around the U.S. to stay in business and sell wines, because that revenue source becomes limited because they lose some of that market share because the wines become priced out or the clients become priced out. And so that obviously hurts their businesses, which hurts the American wines that they distribute as well. So it's really a dead end in terms of moving productivity or any GDP into the U.S. System. Further, it's a bit of a painful reality check for everybody in the business, because everybody who is in the wine business does what they do out of passion and to get paid something. That's their living. And so the winemakers have a living that they need to make. The importers have a living they need to make. If there's a distributor that isn't identical to the importer, then that person has money that they need to make. The retailers do too, the restaurants as well. Needless to say, this week I've spent quite a lot of time speaking with winemakers about Trump tariffs. It's everyone's favorite topic, with a half smile or a shaking head. And what I've heard, or sort of said to them, is that this is a moment where everybody's got to take a bit of a haircut. I think that winemakers in Europe have to trim their prices a tiny bit, and distributors and importers have to do the same, and then retailers do too. But a lot of the Burgundians were just in New York for the Palais. They said they couldn't believe the prices that the wines are selling at in the restaurants. And I was like, well, the thing is, the cost of doing business if you're a restaurant is extremely high right now. They need to make money too. So
but they
everybody's got to take a...
They don't see they don't see it in the way that a restaurant works on, small margins, and they have to make it up somewhere. Their response,
they don't understand
their response is genuine.
Yeah, of course, they don't understand the rent or labor realities of the businesses in the U.S. That's understandable. That's not their business. So everyone's got to take a bit of a haircut. That having been said, 20% is painful, mostly at the lower end of the market, which is bad for wine. And it's really bad for wine because the lower end of the market, the less expensive wines, where the 20% really makes a big difference. And if it was a $20 wine, that's now become a $24 wine. It's less useful or capable of fitting into a by the glass category in many restaurants. It turns into from maybe a $50 bottle of wine on a wine list to an $80 bottle of wine on the wine list. The retail price goes up, and all that does is contribute towards young people who may not be so into wine yet, being more and more turned away from the possibilities of drinking wines of quality. And so that's a net negative. The flip side of that is the very top end of the market, the 20% tax isn't debilitating. Most people who would pay $1,000 for a bottle would pay $1,200 for the same bottle if it's the right bottle. And that's the painful side of the tariffs. They really don't work at the top end. They only hurt.
They can absorb
those of lesser means, both producers and consumers.
Now, Jeff, with you, I'm more, interested in how this affects, your world, what you do, not the effects of tariffs overall, but, personalize it. Will it get in the way of things? Can you get around this? I mean, what are your thoughts?
I mean, having just gone to Vin Italy, which is one of the world's largest wine fairs, there were only two topics of conversations that I had between the hundreds of meetings I had over the past 5 days. It was tariffs and then young consumers. Right. And as Raj just noted, this damages specifically that whole category of consumer and type of wine. The interesting thing that I learned, and I think, again, this actually hurts American business more than it hurts European business. Because for every $1, let's say X winery here in Italy makes from selling a wine to the United States, there's $4 made by the various companies. So that would be the import, distributor, restaurant, retailer. Right. So that money is what's actually being lost at the end of the day. The other thing that I heard a lot of producers talking about is just looking at the United States as a bad faith trading partner and wanting to really actively decrease the percentage of wine sold in the States. Even though it's a huge market, I talked to some producers that actually a few years ago started where they had 40% of their market share in the United States, really looking at, just like you would with a diversified portfolio of stocks and bonds and cash and whatnot, getting more diversified and going to different markets and opening up smaller markets, but more smaller markets, so you can sell X wine here, where it adds up to a cumulative effect where you don't have to put all your eggs in one basket.
So that's sort of, F them. We won't give them as much. We'll figure ways to diversify and sell it other ways, right?
Exactly.
I mean, I think the EU's whole approach to tariffs, other than wine, is that too, So,
right.
I mean, that's where the world is going. This is a good segue because you were in Vin Italy. We talked about, obviously, how you're devoting, a lot of, almost all your time and energy to Italian wines and all that. You had mentioned the future and health of wines. With all this, the tariffs we just discussed, I mean, what is your feeling? Let's stay with Italian wines, about the state of Italian wines or the future and health. Does the tariff thing become a big roadblock? Are things going to be okay? I mean, I don't need you to write a book on this, but what's your immediate feelings?
I mean, my immediate feeling, it's obviously a challenge for everybody, but I think in the long run, most people will be okay. Talking to some importers and some producers, 20%, 25% tariff is like a death by 1,000 paper cuts.
Boy.
It's never immediate. It's just these little jabs. So like if the rest of your costs keep going up, so shipping, and we're already starting to see this in speaking to some producers recently and importers, is that in anticipation for these tariffs, shipping companies, trucking companies, box manufacturing companies, all of their costs are also increasing. So just like we saw in COVID, an inflationary rise in these extra costs, which even if you have to, like, everybody takes a little haircut on their margins, well, now all of their costs are increased, so there's less margin. And if you're a winery on the edge or an importer on the edge, that could cause your demise, which is the scariest possibility.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable with that. Well, we're going to have to see how things play out. Hopefully, fingers crossed. All right, so I don't want to bore the world with tariffs or whatever.
Economic policy of Raj and Jeff. Here we go.
Yeah. No. That part's interesting. It's the idea that we have to talk about it and, worry about the effects. All right. So let's talk about your newborn baby, Convivio del Vino, an Italian wine festival coming to New York City the end of April, which is really the end of this month and a few days into May. So, Jeff, stay with me on this. When did the idea hatch? Give me the vitals on this. When did this hatch? How do you bring it to reality? How do you wind up, with Raj and Daniel? Tell me, bring me to the beginning of this.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been fortunate enough to have been invited to Palais and La Fête de Champagne to work as a sommelier many times while I was a sommelier in New York City, and got to know Raj and Daniel pretty well and just respect all the work they've done. And Raj and I became friends via barbecue and eating and drinking. And I think, Raj, is this like 2 years ago? We just started kind of spitballing. In my head, it always been like, I always saw Palais as this amazing opportunity to bring people together, and it evoked the spirit that I wanted to be a part of in wine, which is community. There's a community of growers, a community of sommeliers, and a community of consumers, and all in one place. And there's a joyousness about the event. And I was like, man, I want people to see and feel that way with Italian wines. So it's always been like rumerating. There's another word I get to make up, like a good Texan.
Yeah, what the hell is that?
I believe it's meant to be ruminating.
Ruminating.
Yeah.
I gave a speech
Raj,
today.
Please let Norm Crosby continue.
For 30 minutes in Italian today, guys. So my mouth is like full of marbles. It was a very challenging speech.
So keep going.
Well,
So give me the steps to how it. Go ahead.
Well, I can just remind you, Jeff. So this is now almost 3 years ago. We had this discussion.
3 years.
You helped us when we did our first expansion of the festival into the Los Angeles market with La Palais in 2022. You helped us as the head sommelier on that occasion. You'd obviously worked the festivals prior to that, and it was sort of a wind down or a post Palais dinner you and I had in the spring of 2022 that started the beginnings of the idea. I mean, clearly that was already on your mind as you explicated it to me. And then we discussed collectively the possibility of doing it now much more recently. In fact, it was really last year in April when we discussed it with Daniel. And this was post me visiting you in Torino. You were absolutely fantastic host while I was visiting back last year in March.
And that, that conversation and just wanting to show the world the way I feel about Italian wine is just like the way Daniel and Raj and the team feel about French wine. And obviously there's so much crossover between the producers, like almost all the producers from Lafette and from Palais know all these producers at Convivio and vice versa. And so there's a synergy there. But when we sat down and talked and I mean, the coolest thing is that the Palais team just has such an amazing infrastructure and understanding of how to create an event that feels fun and joyous and not dogmatic. And
so you don't have to start, you could plug in. So what? Right. So obviously you have, these fairs have a similarity in community and the type of winemakers, but you had in your mind have a mission and a goal with this specifically. What did you want to, what did you want to pull off? And then think even further, when the attendees leave all of these things, what do you want them to take away from all of this?
I mean, when Daniel, Raj, and I kind of really pulled it together, I went to two producers in particular, people that have been instrumental in my personal career, my life, my family's life. We went to Chiar Pepe, who's a dear friend of mine. We've known each other for forever. Right. We've grown up together. And then Luca and Elena Carrata, who've been some of my biggest mentors and helpers in our move to Italy. And we discussed the idea, and we talked about, how to select for this first event a group of producers, because we needed to keep it small because this is the first time, it's proof of concept, and we're not sure the reaction. And we decided to focus on families, to focus on, legends. And as you said it, very eloquently, and I appreciate that. Like, it's legends, it's people who are in this generational shift between parents and children and up and comers. And so what I want the consumers to feel when they leave is, one, I hope it's like an onion. Italian wine is so complex and complicated, and there's so many different grapes that at this event, they're going to get to try the classics Nebbiolo and Sangiovese. Then they're going to get to try Lambrusco di Sabauda or Forpato or Catanau, right? And so I just want them to peel back the layers. This is way more than Chardonnay, Cabernet Sauvignon, and Pinot Noir, right? There's so much here. And it's. I just want people to walk away and be like, wow, I didn't know Italian wine was this dynamic, this energetic, and had so many different. It's like a rainbow, right? It's the Skittles of wine, right? And that's what I want them to walk away with.
But I think by the end of the podcast, the listener is going to know even more and why about what you're saying, because we're going to get into it. One of the things, and spank me if I'm wrong on this. One of the things you didn't mention, and I think it's obviously there, is, these are all thoughtful farmers, right? These are people with an eye towards sustainability. I'm not saying these are all organic, biodynamic, or natural, but is it clear to say that these are all, thoughtful winemakers and farmers?
The way I put it is they're all conscious in everything that they do. And it was one of the biggest compliments I got was with one of the attendees who will be there, Ariana Occhipinti. I saw her just yesterday when I was at Vin Italy, and she said the exact same thing. She looked at this list and she said, wow, these are my contemporaries. We all have the same sensibility and the same idea of maintaining our land and providing our community with something that's will outlive us. And that's what this group represents.
She nailed it. Raj, you and Daniel have a lot of experience with wine festivals. Not maybe, but top of the game in all of this. I mean, this is a dumb question, maybe obvious, but why Italian wine? Why Jeffrey? Why now? Just all made sense.
Well, the story is quite simple. First and foremost, we are wine lovers before we are anything else. And although we're clearly identified with French wine, that's not always been the case in either of our careers. Daniel lived in central Italy back in the 70s. Italy was the first European country I visited as a little kid. My family loved to travel, and I have vivid memories of observing wine on the table, like my parents enjoying wine on the table, for when I was a little kid. It was the first time that in India we don't have a culture for wine drinking, so to observe adults kind of engaging with it, and it wasn't just a beverage. It wasn't like a Coca-Cola or a beer or whiskey. There was something further to it that was culturally interesting. I have memories of that. So it had a big impact on me. I spent time there, backpacking in my late teens when I had the benefit of facial hair, and therefore nobody questioned me when I asked for a bottle of wine when I was in Italy. And it was truly magical. I love Italian wine, but neither Daniel nor I are experts in Italian wine, or specialists, I should say, although we do know what we know and what we love, and we drink a lot of it. And also, we've had a more recent sort of robust connection with Italy. We have been brought in to do an event for a top fashion brand last year, and got to spend some more time in Italy. And I remember saying this to Jeff. I don't remember if I saw you, Jeff, right before or right after. I said, what's amazing about Italy is that I'm here in Beaune in France, which is one of the culinary capitals quietly of France, although it's not talked about so much because it's really amazing how many great restaurants there are. And like pretty much everything is of a certain quality level. But it's not true everywhere in France. If you pull off the highway and go to some random, auberge or bar in the middle of nowhere, chances are you're getting something that comes to you via microwave. But that's not true in Italy. You pull off the road, and I remember we were going from Perugia to Rome, and we were with a friend and colleague who spends a lot more time in Europe than lives in Italy now than we do. And he just kind of took charge. We were admittedly half in the bag after having had maybe a bottle of wine right before leaving. And he just directed the driver via Google search to some town that looked pretty on the top of a hill. And we showed up there. It was a medieval town. There was only one business open. All the restaurants that were on Google were definitely not open. And it was the local bar. But what the local bar had was sustenance of the top level. The most delicious pasta, typically a baked pasta, a salad that was, absolutely delicious and perfect, and a bottle of wine that was best described as red and perfect for the occasion. And that's the kind of experience you can only have in Italy. It's unique, I think, in many ways to Italy. That and the fact that you can pull over at a rest area and have an espresso, and it's like a 14-year-old girl making it, and she's using one hand to gesture to somebody at the bar, and she's talking shit about something local, and only get one hand to make the espresso, and it's better than 100% of the espressos you can have in France, because the Italians care so much about coffee, and they're chic. Right. So we had this draw and natural love for all of these wonderful things and these wonderful people. Also have a love for listening to the language, although I'm no Italian speaker. And then we have a love for Jeff. And Jeff, came to us with this idea that was really founded in a love for and a protective nature for the producers of great wines in Italy, to make sure that they were celebrated in the right way by U.S. consumers, and that's something that drives us in a great way. That's what the Palais is all about.
Raj, I think we led up to the fact the type of winemakers and Jeff's mission and all that. Is this event different than the other festivals?
Naturally, it's not a region. The rest of the festivals that we've
right. Okay, good to point that
have
out.
always been specific to one region, and then typically as a result, a fairly narrow set of grape varieties and styles of wine. Although, of course, it'd be foolish to say there's only one style of wine made in Burgundy. That's clearly
Right.
not true. There is a bit more of a through line connective tissue. This is quite different. And, Jeff can speak to this, the history of Italy much more clearly than I can. But I think it's really impressive to me that such a diverse country in terms of vinous output has at the same time what they call in France a savoir-faire, a sort of cultural identity that brings them all together. And the country's less than 200 years old. It's
Right.
in a sense it's younger than America as one country. Although obviously the regional histories are much deeper than that. But so the notion that we can produce something that's now truly Italian, and at the same time have such tremendous diversity in the offerings is pretty special. I think it's really compelling, and it's very, very different for us. We're super excited about the personalities, about the excitement that the producers have around it, but also I see this as frankly being the kind of if we can categorize wine as Italian wine, which is an awfully broad category, in a robust and coherent way, it's an amazing way to get those young consumers that I'm very interested in bringing into the fold, connected with wine, because in an era where alcohol consumption is decreasing, and there's all sorts of conversations around wine being bad for you in terms of health, and the fact that it's becoming expensive, and now it's about to become even more expensive in the US on account of tariffs. All of these things are bad for the world of wine. And I see Italy on the flip side, just as it was for me, young in my career, as an amazing way to get into wine and get to really try fantastic small producers who make wines that are very soulful and that speak of the places that they come from. That's the stuff that makes people fall in love with wine. And then once that's been achieved, we can party down with more people. We can't.
I agree
we can't
with
allow
you.
people to move away from wine and not do something about it. So I see it as part of that crusade.
Soulful is the word. I'm starting to overuse soulful like people use minerality. Just because when you take, and Jeff, you'll agree, when you take a festival like this with the winemakers, pretty much everyone's a soulful winemaker. Now, Jeff, let's talk about Convivio itself. It's a 4-day affair. It starts literally the end of the month, April. Break it down for me. There's basically 3 or 4 things going on: themed dinners, a grand tasting, a big dinner. Walk me through each thing and put any color you want on any of that.
So it's a crescendo to the final event, and again mirrored after what happens with the Palais and La Fête and La Table. But we're starting out with a small, very intimate dinner, the pillars of Piemonte, and it's. I mean, when I look at this dinner, when Raj and I were putting it together for the event, it just reminded me of my days at Del Posto, of just like truly an epic, historic group of wines. And we picked producers, except for one, that aren't coming, that weren't able to come this year. We got so much positive feedback when we talked to the producers, and some of the names that we all love just couldn't come this year because of just timing or having children or whatnot. But the first event is, Mascarello, Giacosa, Rinaldi, and Conterno, and it's.
You couldn't get anybody good? Jesus Christ! It's like an orgasm.
It is.
This is a list of producers that they're clearly in the very, very top category of most sought after wines from Piemonte, and this is
any
actually
wines,
like,
not just
I feel
Italian.
like well, also in speaking with Jeff, I was like, this is something I can talk about. You know, I didn't work closely in Italian wine for a very, very long time, but I worked at the restaurant Cru with under Robert Bohr and with an amazing team there. One of the best Piedmontese collections that New York has ever seen. And like these were the wines I got my education in Piedmont from. So for me, they're really like the icons, not just the icons, but the standard bearers of historic wines of Piedmont.
So Jeff, that's the first of a bunch of dinners. That's the first night. Dinner. You name the 4 makers. Will representatives, if not the principals from the wineries, be there?
For that dinner, it's just the wines. And
okay.
You're lucky enough to get Raj and I believe Daniel to be there.
And you guys select
also, if I can, the wines are all sourced from the Rare Wine Company, which is a tremendous source for
Manny Burke,
historic Italian wines, and Manny will be in attendance as well.
Oh, nice!
And I'm sure he'll comment on the wines also.
So you said, what'd you say? 4 winemakers. How many different wines are you going to pour? 4 or 5 from each?
It's 3 or 4 from each. So in most cases it's 3, but we found a pretty compelling list of wines from Conterno.
13 wines.
13 wines. All right. So while
also a little champagne.
Jeff, yeah, well, of course, you have to, wet the palate. So, Jeff, let's stay on the dinner thing. That's the first one. Getting into specifics is exciting because when we talk about this one, look at the producers. Go down the the rest of them for me.
So the next dinner, I'm super excited. I mean, one of the cool things about living here and just having come here for the past for 20 years is getting to meet the kids of the producers. And now the kids are taking over the domain. So I've known a lot of these people since they were like, 10, 11 or teenagers, and now they're running the winery. So we have a dinner called Passing the Torch or Passing the Baton is the name of the dinner. And it's 4 estates, Foradori, which is based in Trento, which Elisabetta Foradori kind of helped redefine the entire region and introduce the world to Raldigo, and her son Emilio will be there. This small producer from Alto Adige that's had been farming for 200 years, and the daughter Maria Nidris is just taking over the estate. She is a force of nature who is making unbelievable Pinot Noir and Pinot Blanc in Alto Adige. Then we have Petrolo, which is an estate in the Val d'Arno area. Luca San Giusto had kind of really helped revitalize this area. And if you can see in your mind's eye the Mona Lisa in the back, there's a little bridge, and that's the bridge of Arezzo, and that's where this region is. And it was very, very famous for wine a long, long time ago, and they kind of revitalized it starting in the 80s. And his son Luca, Rocco San Giusto, is going to take over the winery, and he'll be there. And then last but not least, my family here in Piemonte, the Pinacorata family, Elena Pinacorata will be here with her son Michele. And as you know, the Luca and Elena left Vietti and started their own winery, Cascina Pinacorata, and this is kind of them handing the reins over to their kids at this dinner, which is for me, it's this just like amazing that we have this ability to have the parents and the children in the same meal and share their wines.
All right, so that's incredible. I've been spending time actually doing shows. I had Dominique Lafon and his son, with the generational shift there and other people, but also shameless plug. Elena's been on the show, and Chiara, who you mentioned earlier, has been on the show. They're in the archives, but it'll be exciting to see and taste them. All right, so that's the second. Keep going.
So the final small dinner is the Legends dinner. And these 4 producers have kind of defined they've defined the region that they're from. So we have Fabio Alessandria, who represents GB Berlotto. So that's of Monvillero fame. Chiara Pepe of Emidio Pepe. Mattia Gravner of Gravner. And then Cinzia Merli of Le Macchiole in Bulgari. So 4 estates that represent kind of the greatness of each of these regions.
Unbelievable.
Gravner
may be the biggest outlier as far as types of wines, right?
Absolutely. But one of the most important gets, in my opinion, because if you think of the popularity of macerated or orange wine today, of course, we have thousands of years of Georgian history, but in the modern age of wine, Grosvenor was the person that reinvented it for the rest of us.
Yep. He's kind of the OG, right? The Big Mac Daddy.
And that is, so each of these dinners, the 2 dinners with the 4 estates is 16 wines. So it's it's 4 wines per estate. It's a lot of wine and a lot of history, which is super, super cool.
So we'll give everybody more info on the website, and there are still some tickets available. We'll get into that in a minute, and we'll bang it a few times during the show. Those dinners go during the week, and then on Saturday is a very typical. It's a grand tasting. Tell me about how that's set up.
Raj, this is your format. I know how it is, but you really know how to describe it best.
Happy to. So all of the participating winemakers will be presenting a host of their wines that are currently in the market. It's a really unique opportunity to meet all of these tremendous winemakers, but also to really chat with them about the wines and really get the story. We staff each table with the winemaker, alongside with the winemaker, with help from the sommelier community at large in the New York area, although some people are even traveling to join us. And so they'll be pouring while the winemaker gets to speak, and you really have an intimate opportunity to get connected with
I think that's
these amazing producers.
It's a big deal to go to an event and taste an aggregate of wines. That itself is a big deal. But as you mentioned, the fact, and Jeff, you've been talking about it, that all these winemakers are here, and to be able to interact and don't short sell how lit up and excited these people get, when people start asking them and talking about the wines. It's just, it's magical almost in that sense.
They're coming to share their passion. So
right. Raj, as in past, events, there's always kind of food or vendors around. Is that going to be going on?
Absolutely. You can't have great wine without some delicious food coming around,
Okay. All right. So, but that's a good lead into something that's typical of a La Paule and La Fate, which is at the end of the day of the tasting, that night is a big grand dinner. Jeff, set that up. I mean, I know you've worked a lot and, they've gone on, but, set up how this is going to go and how you see it going.
Well, I'm just super psyched because it kind of really brings together a lot of different parts of my history with the chefs that are part of the
Let's talk about them.
Tavola de Convivio.
3 killers.
They're the number of stars is pretty amazing. So we have Melissa Rodriguez of Crane Club, and Melissa and I worked together at Del Posto for almost a decade, and Melissa and Raj worked together at Danielle, and we're all dear friends, and she's one of my idols as a friend, but also as a chef, unparalleled palate, and just a wonderful human being. Then we have Stefano Secchi of Resdora and Massara. Stefano was a server when I was the wine director at Osteria Mozza in Los Angeles.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
The guy's like the pasta wizard.
And he was one of the few servers that would come to every wine education opportunity that we offered the staff, no matter what. And we became friends through that. And he's a chef that loves wine and does a ton of wine trips on his own. And so it's really cool to have seen him be this gangly, passionate server who just moved from Italy to now be a Michelin-starred chef with 2 restaurants in New York City and going to be at Convivio.
And he's super, super excited. I run into him all the time.
He worked with Massimo Bottura, didn't he?
Did he work with Massimo Bottura, Jeff? I didn't know that. If so.
To be honest, I don't know if he. No, he did. He worked. He did work.
I think
with
he did,
Bottura.
Jeff. But
he did.
That means nothing, for this discussion. But it's very cool how deep and wine he is.
I run into him often at the Union Square Green Market, and he is very excited about cooking this dinner. And I think he really has a clear understanding of the wines and how to really interplay in the perfect way that sort of pairing. So it's exciting to have him on board.
And then finally, Michael White, who is just an icon. And for me, it's interesting. I never worked for Chef White. I've only met him a few times, but in all the lead up to me moving to New York, wherever his restaurants were is where I went. And his understanding and appreciation for the culture of Italy is extremely important, and I think is a capstone to this event.
Yeah, I mean, he's had tremendous. Eric Repair is the Michael White of French seafood, or Michael White is the Eric Repair of Italian seafood and beyond. It's a great mix of people. So just play that dinner out for me a little. It's you buy a ticket. It's a very big communal thing. Take it from there.
So we'll have kind of long. Oh, allow me, Jeff, if I may.
Yeah, no worries.
It's going to be long tables where guests are seated, interlaced with the producers who are attending. Producers have brought wines from their cellars and some pretty special bottles, some large format bottles, and we encourage the guests to do the same. So bring bottles from your cellars, Italian wine that you've been saving to share with the right kind of people, and it becomes a very convivial and sort of special moment where wine is really meant to be shared. Community is meant to be built by way of wine, and this is an exercise in that, if you will.
Right. That's pretty simple but accurate. But I think in the moment, you have all these winemakers, with wines that are not what they pour during the day out of their cellars. You have everyone from neophytes to big collectors schlepping in their bottles of wine. We just talked about, three of the greatest chefs. Wine's a great social lubricant. Get a few glasses in everyone. And Jeff, you'll agree, you got a room that's buzzing, right?
It's an Italian's party at a different level.
Right.
And it's in just having, again, but had been at Vin Italy, I made it a point to go visit every producer that was at Vin Italy who's going to be at Convivium. And the smiles when I'd walk up to the booth and they'd be like, I'm so ready to be in New York.
Yeah.
We're so excited. Nothing like this has really ever happened in the world of Italian wine. And you can just see the energy that they're ready to bring to this event.
So we have to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk more about that. I want to talk about, how they look at it and, get a little into, the wines and the people and all of that, plus a bunch of other things. So we're talking to Jeff Porter. We're talking to Raj Vadia. We're talking to them about wine and their upcoming wine festival, Convivio del Vino, coming the end of the month. When we come back, we'll get into it a little more. You're listening to The Grape Nation on the Heritage Radio Network.
This episode is brought to you by Plugra European-style butter, crafted for those who demand precision and exceptional results in the kitchen. With 82% butter fat and a slow churn process, Plugra gives you flakier crusts, fluffier cakes, and rich, melt-in-your-mouth pastries. Because great baking starts with great butter. Unlike standard American butters, which have only 80% butter fat, Plugra ensures the ideal moisture and fat balance so your recipes turn out just right every time. That's why professional chefs trust Plugra and home bakers love it. Plugra's slow churn process creates a smooth, creamy butter that gives dough a soft, pliable texture, making rolling, folding, and laminating effortless. Whether you're perfecting a buttery pie crust or layering a delicate croissant, Plugra helps you bake with confidence. Experience the difference for yourself. Find Plugra in stores near you or visit plugra.com. That's Plugra.com.
All right, we're back. Welcome back. My guests are Raj Vadia and Jeff Porter. Jeff and Raj, along with Daniel Johns, has put together an Italian wine festival, Convivio del Vino, coming up end of April and early May. All right, so you have over 30 Italian winemakers, or about 30. I counted, and you can correct me on any of this. It looks like 14 regions, which you guys talked earlier. Raj, you really made the good point that, La Fête du Champagne is the region of Champagne, although there's regions in Champagne, and Burgundy, same thing there. But this is the country in all the regions. So 30 winemakers, about 14 regions, pouring somewhere upwards of 150 wines. One of the things I noticed was, you go to some of these festivals and they pour one wine or two wine. It looks like everyone's pulling out, more than a couple of wines. Is that true, Jeff?
It is true. We had asked everyone to bring 4 wines, 2 current vintage and then 2 maybe with a little more age. And almost all the producers were like, no, we want to bring more. And we had to be like, no. In Italy, we say piano, piano, like, it's okay, calm down a little bit. And some are like, nope, here's 6 wines we're going to bring, or 8 wines. And it's a pretty, this is going to be one of the probably most informative explorations of Italian wine a person could have in one setting.
I agree. Now, how did you curate that list? I mean, did you keep in mind, I want regions, I want the right how do you, and I'm curious, could you have done more? Is this the right list?
I mean, we could always, there's like space, right? Like we have the venue, and I mean, there are 100 or plus more producers I would love to have invited.
Okay.
But being the first year, when Raj and Daniel and I talking, we wanted to keep it modest and tight and select. And the way I kind of viewed it in my head from the sommelier perspective is like, listen, if I had a small little wine bar in New York City and I only wanted to be an Italian wine bar, and I could have just the best of the best, in my opinion, of what they're doing to represent Italian wine today, that's what Convivio del Vino represents.
Good description. And is it true that it's harder to put together a tight, smaller wine list than a bigger one? Just because less choices
so.
And within those right?
Choosing the wine list for Del Posto was so much harder than for like our smaller pizzeria that we would open.
Right. Now
you said harder, Jeff, but I think you meant easier when you're.
Well, Del Posto is much easier than
because it was bigger. Yeah. Good to point that out, Raj.
When you can buy everything, just add it all
buy everything
to curate something and make it coherent and make it really a balanced offering so that people will get something. I believe in a tasting like this with this many great producers, it's impossible for someone to go in there and not come out having discovered something truly compelling and new to them. I want to,
Raj, that's a good point. I want to get into that because I want to sort of gauge the effectiveness of all of this. But I have a few other questions. Jeff, any regions you left out because you were curating a tighter list? Any regrets?
I mean, I would have really liked to have had all 20 regions represented. It just...
Okay. Well, you batted pretty good.
We got close. But, for something like this and in talking with Chiara and Luca and Elena, we decided that it was just best to keep it, in this tight-knit family. And everybody here on this list, I have a personal relationship with. So It even took it to that next level. These are not just people I respect. These are my friends.
Right.
And that was important to me as well.
Is anyone coming into the States for the first time in their lifetime?
Maria Nidrist, I think this is her first time.
Interesting.
Charoux from Sardinia, La Visciola from Lazio.
That'll be fun.
La Terra Alta from Lombardia, it's their first time. Niccolo Gatta's first time. Nicholas Juretic, his first time. For wine. Some of them are here for vacation.
Yeah.
But not for selling wine, or not for presenting their wine.
That's fun, and that'll add excitement on both sides for the attendee and for the winemaker. They'll kind of be glowing.
Yeah, and I would single out a handful also that they're superstars who just don't do stuff like this very much.
Right.
And so like Grosvenor, it's super exciting that Grosvenor's coming. Grosvenor is just doesn't do events like this, so to have Grosvenor represented is huge. Certainly is true of Stella di Campalto and Beatrice, and
Beatrice.
Frankly, I think both Jeff and I were delighted, but taken by surprise when Roberto Conterno reached out and said he would like to join. After all, we'd asked him originally, but then didn't think he was going to be able to make it because he doesn't really do events like this anymore. But to be able to have him in the room and joining us is very special.
Right. So we talked about this before, and I want both of you guys to chime in. We've been describing these winemakers, small family wineries, generational stuff. I'm guessing these guys have limited funds. Do you guys think that the expense of coming to New York to pay for their time and effort and, their wines, is it worth it for them? I mean, you kind of answered it a little by exposing it to a new audience, but in the end, is the time and investment, going to come back to them in a good way? Because I know in your hearts that's your intention, but what's the reality?
I think absolutely. I mean, the opportunity for them to have a real connection with the people who drink their wines and wine's a special thing. I've probably said this before on the podcast, so forgive me if I'm being repetitive. But wine is the only thing like this where you have literally decades worth of investment in order to be able to get a bottle of wine on the table, from planting the vineyard to farming it year in and year out, whether or not you can get a crop, to harvesting grapes, to fermentation, élevage, aging the wine, putting it in a bottle, bringing it to market, all of that. It goes into a cellar maybe and ages for another 10 years. So there's all of that investment of time and energy. The wine never reaches its potential or its purpose until you pull the cork and you drink it. And for these producers to have the opportunity to do that with the end consumers, that's a big part of why we do what we do. It's a very special, intimate connection. And, many winemakers toil all year long and don't get to see the other side of that. They know it's there. They understand the métier, the purpose, but to create an opportunity for the producers to see who drinks their wine and for the drinkers to see who made their wine and to be able to do it together, I think that alone is definitely worth it. Of course, it remains to be seen in terms of the market. It is an expense for sure. That said, we are not the kind of wine festival where we're asking the producers to pay a fee. There are some that require that. We're quite the opposite. We're paying for their lodging while they're in New York, and
nice.
Jeff and I are the entertainment committee, so we're gonna take them out.
So to my point, you're easing some of the expense for them, which is a wonderful thing in that sense.
Absolutely. Well, it's an investment. It's an investment on all of our parts.
And the interesting. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I just to continue what Raj has said from the producer's standpoint, because I speak to these people daily almost right now, is that one, when we were first starting this up, they're like, well, how much do you need from us? I was like, no, your wine, and I'm sorry we can't cover your plane ticket, but we're going to pay for your hotel rooms. There's no fee. None of them could believe that. In Italian wineries get taken advantage of a lot in the world of wine because they're, for good or for bad, there's always been a chip on the Italian shoulder for a lot of other, towards France, towards the United States. They've never, a lot of times, felt like they've gotten the respect or due that they've deserved. And so, for one thing, a lot of them were just taken aback by our trying to be super hospitable and throw a festival that was truly about, elevating their presence. And also, thanks to all the sommeliers who volunteer their time, they're like, wait, I don't have to pour my wine. I was like, no, you get to talk to the guests.
That's great.
And they still can't wrap their head. Like, I had to explain it like 5 times to one winery just the other day. And then finally, in talking to them, they're so excited to be with their colleagues because they don't get to see each other very often.
That's the beauty of it all, when it all kind of gels together. My next question is so sort of relevant to what we've just been talking about the last minute, and I'll set it up for you, and you answer it as gracefully or however you want to answer it. So we know there are a few wine critics in this world that, really love Italian wine, and they actually do Italian wine events, however they do it, right? So, and we're not going to mention names, but, we're talking prominent people to the winemakers and familiar to us. So we may have answered this question, but, put an exclamation point on it. How does Convivio del Vino differentiate, from these other guys' events?
Well, I can speak to the fact that I have a tremendous amount of respect. For example, Antonio Goloni does the Festa di Piemonte. I've worked the event a number of years. So it often actually coincides with bad timing for me when I'm in France, so I wasn't there this year. But I'm a huge fan of the event. I think it's done a lot for the visibility on Piedmont, which is a darling of the New York collector set, especially at the high end. So massive amounts of respect for what has been created previously. A Wine Spectator does their big wine event. It's not specific to Italian wine, but some of the greatest Italian names, the household names, the royal families of Italy, effectively, are always present and showing great wine. And James Suckling does a pretty awesome event where I've been a couple of times and I always discover something interesting and some great wines. It seems like that's more of a trade focused event to me,
Right.
But which is awesome. All of these people do something quite different than what we're doing here. And Jeff can speak to this in terms of the selection, and has already, of the producers. But what isn't well represented, I think, in those is really a snapshot of Italy as a whole, in or from a lens of small producers who don't otherwise have a voice unless they collectively get together. And while they collectively get together often in terms of regional focus, something like this has just never happened before, where the new faces of Italy, or the current state of affairs of the world of wine of Italy, is brought into focus in this way with small producers. And without Jeff's input, his relationships and his friendships with these people, this wouldn't be possible. This is 100%. Jeff is the talent here. I mean, the winemakers are the talent, but Jeff is the muscle and the brains.
Jeff, you want to add anything?
No, I mean, I've been Antonio's head sommelier for Festa di Barolo since 2011 until 2022.
Wow.
And that festival changed my life, and I appreciate everything that Antonio's done, and just I agree with everything Raj said with all the other other events. This is a festival, and I
wanted to point that out, because Antonio and Suckling do festivals. They all, like Raj, you said, I mean, Goloni's brilliant with Piedmontese wines and all of that. But Suckling does a major event, and now Antonio does this Icons thing, and Wine Spectator's been doing it, forever. And they're in that same category that you guys are in, So the differentiation, I think, like I said, we discussed the curation, the size. You discuss that you'll have Psalms pouring, so these guys are more available. It maybe is a little less frenetic for the
and also
attendees.
The producers are all definitely there. In Antonio's case, the producers are there. But for example, at Suckling's event, some were producers, some were
that's a sheer volume
winery, marketing people, etc. Still a great opportunity to taste wine, but quite a different experience. And again, I think that event is more trade focused. I certainly amongst all the people there, I was amongst mostly people in the trade. I
say God bless to everybody, for doing that. And everybody takes their own lane. We've talked about, the Convivio lane. One last thing before I want to ask you, before we do the wine list, and maybe just talk about Chiara's wine. And this isn't meant to be painful or uncomfortable, but to me, Convivio feels a little different. I mean, it feels a little different because of everything we discussed, the community, the type of winemakers, the size, the curation. But, in the end, it's sort of a high-end wine event. I mean, do you guys think about or worry about, exclusivity, maybe a little elitism? There's a cost to the consumer, for the tasting or the dinners. Manny Burke has to bring all these wines in. They're not cheap. You have to pass that fairly along. I mean, how do you respond to all of that?
Well, wine isn't free. Some of the wines that we're presenting are truly special and exceptional. Some are, more everyday wines. There's a absolute value associated with them. When we try and bring value to the consumer, clearly,
right.
The whole point of it is, yes, it isn't free. It does cost money to come to the tasting, but when you come to the tasting, you can taste a pretty insane list of wines with the producers pouring them. That's an experience that can't be had elsewhere, frankly.
Right.
And I really believe, especially in this day and age where wine has become quite expensive, that, we have clients for whom this is a big spend, but they see the value in it, so they do it, but then they can't do anything else if they can only come to the tasting, or they can only come to one of the small dinners. And then we have guests who, can afford to buy all of it and do or don't according to their whim and fancy. The one thing they all share in common today as consumers of fine wine, and after all, this is in the category of fine wine, it's not a discount bin by any means. None of these producers are producing the kind of things that end up in the discount bin.
Right.
All of these wine lovers and aficionados and consumers value the experience in a different way than they value the bottle of wine. And so I think if you look at it as a complete experience, what we try an effort to do is to produce something that's unique and wonderful, that makes it a value for anybody who can participate. Now, that said, we don't work in the world of beer, and if we did, we'd have to decide if we were in the world of beer that everyone can afford, or that
Right.
people can't. We do that in terms of wine. We know that great wine is inherently costly to produce and therefore costly to sell. It's not to say that everything has to be expensive, but many of them will be, and I think that brings some of the value to many guests. You can't pay this much money and taste. Many of these producers' wines exceed the dollar amount that the tasting costs, per a bottle at the tasting. So
I agree
it's
with
not
that.
a question of, we want to be as inclusive as possible. Of course, we would never turn anybody away, but we do, we're also presenting a wine event in New York City with plenty of costs that go into it. And, it's a huge investment on our part that, of course, needs to be balanced out. So that's what that comes down to.
I agree.
There's nothing about it that's exclusive in terms of programmatically being so. Although,
Right.
of course, some people will be left out because they can't afford it.
Right. Fair. Well, that's sort of what I meant. Of course, you wouldn't be exclusive in other ways. I did say Convivio feels a little different. I mean, kudos to you, Jeff. There's we're going to talk about a wine in a few minutes, the Chiaro Condello, which is about as good of a quality to value as you can get, affordable. And Raj, like you said, the experience of accessing wines that are not so easy, is definitely an attribute. Jeff, anything you want to add? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm looking at the website right now. I want to thank Daniel and Raj from the bottom of my heart, because this is a dream, and to see it as a reality, like on this website, is really emotional. Because these wines, like, some people could look at it and they're like, oh my God, they know Giacomo Conterno, but like, to look at Lazio, La Visciola, like, one of the things that I really wanted to bring to this is to have people experience, like, Cesanese is not a grape that's on everybody's tongue, right?
Right.
But like, you're going to get to meet this person. And I think the thing that really sets this event apart is they're there. And with Italians especially, like, Ben, you come by, you'll talk to, maybe you'll talk to 35 producers, you'll talk to 20. They'll open their arms to you when you're in Italy. All these people want to talk to you, and they all want you in their home. And I think that's the thing that makes all these people so special. They're super genuine. They're warm, and they want to talk about it. And I think that's what's unique.
I think, that's going to come through in a big way. I think you nailed it as far as what you're going to get when you walk in there. And when I asked earlier, the money spent for these people to come, can they get their time and investment back? I think because of what you just said, people are going to walk out of there entranced. I got to buy this wine. I got to try it. I got to get a case or whatever. So hopefully. All right. Last question. It's kind of a funny question. And you may have answered it a little. But without asking either of you guys to make a Sophie's choice or pick your favorite kid, is there a winemaker or two, that you're excited about bringing to Convivio or region? I think I can help you answer that. I think Gravner, kind of checks one of those boxes because of the uniqueness and that he's not around a lot. But, without, like, I don't want any winemakers coming up to you and saying, when he asked you that question, God willing, they are listening, why didn't you say me? But, what comes to top of mind? What's kind of cool or different about, some of the people coming in that you can make a notation about?
I think for me, there's the honor, and then there's there's heart in every one of these, but
right.
Yeah, to have Roberto Conterno contact you and be like, I want to come to your thing.
Big deal.
That's a big deal. It's a really big deal.
Worth noting.
That's with Gravner, with Stella Compalto. But I think for me, I look at this producer Cheroux. I think Sardinia doesn't get a lot of love, and there's not a. It's in a revolution standpoint right now where there's better wine coming from there. But this is a super small producer that doesn't speak English, that is willing to go from their little island that's a rock in the middle of the Mediterranean in the mountains, where he just farms pigs and makes wine, and coming to New York City for the first time is a huge. That's a huge thing for him, and it's a huge thing for, I think, all of us to be able to be in his presence, because he has a vision about wine that is unique to that place, that I think for a flavor profile that we're not 100% used to, that I think people really be interested in. And then I guess the other one is this Sotto la Noce and the Frizzante Revolution. I was always inspired by the Palais. They had the Aligoté table and the Aligateurs.
Right.
And I always loved that table. And this was inspired by that, because I'm a big fan of Lambrusco. And the Frizzante Revolution is a group of 10 growers that are doing the very ancient style of making rifermentato. And we'll have a table of all of them together, which I think is going to be really fun.
That's awesome. You nailed that answer, man. I could tell you without, picking favorites or leaving anyone out. And if anyone's going, they certainly should look out for that table. Raj, anything, sort of excite you or you pick?
Several of the producers are dear friends. Chiara Pepe is definitely a dear friend of mine, as well as are Luca and Elena Benacarado. I'm super excited primarily to taste the wines I know the least. We had a Zoom call with many of the producers the other day, and to see their faces get very excited about coming to New York, and then looking back at it and realizing I might have tasted a wine here or a wine there, but to be able to deep dive into some of these ranges and the different styles of wines that they make, the ones that I'm the least familiar with are the most exciting for me, because I love discovering new wines. Cheroux, especially because I really don't know the wines, and because Jeff has been talking them up to me for a full year now. I'm super excited to taste those wines. Gracchi, which I've tried a couple of the bottles here and there, but it's pretty rare to get your hands on, and so that's very exciting for me. And then one that I know from my sort of early days as a sommelier, but have fallen out of touch with, Borgo di Tiglio. I used to love those wines, and from the Collio. And it's one of the rare occasions where I have a sort of history of the wines, but I've been out of touch with them for probably 20 years. So those are some that I'm very excited
Those
about.
are good ones. And that helps even expand, people's understanding of the event. Is this, maybe you can answer me, is this the type of thing we could do annually, or difficult because of the winemakers biannually? How would you like to treat this going forward?
We'll see after the first one, but I mean, if there's demand and people are excited, it's the kind of thing, we're very committed as a company in investing in these experiences for guests, and nothing happens overnight. We just celebrated the 25th anniversary of La Palais. Daniel's first La Palais probably had about 20 producers and about 40 consumers who attended, and
a long way,
we probably
Raj.
lost money on it continuously until we finally started breaking even, which isn't that long ago. Frankly. So we're not afraid to invest, but the question remains to be discussed after the fact. We'd love to do it every year.
Right. It's fair to really take a fair look at the business part of it too. All right. We're going to move on to the final two segments of the show. We're going to do the wine list. I want to let you guys know that you are the 299th Grape Nation podcast.
Wow. Congratulations.
And our 300th show will be in a week or so, with another one of my favorite, Raj Parr. He's going to do the 300th show with me because he's a good friend.
Never heard of him.
So that's coming soon. So we've done 300 wine lists with.
Wow.
We've had reoccurring guests, so it's not 300 different guests, but hundreds and hundreds of guests. We've asked everyone the same question since day one. Both of you have done this. Here's what I ask of you. It's spontaneous, be quick, don't dwell on it. I think my listeners, after understanding your guys' expertise and depth in the wine business, they'd love to hear some of these recos. So here's the first question, and let's do it this way. Let's have Raj go first and then Jeff go second. First question is, what are you drinking now? And that is, what's in your fridge? What are you curious about tasting? Do the seasons change how you drink, or are you stuck just tasting the stuff that you're drawn into by business? Like Raj, you have to drink Burgundy. Jeff, you're only drinking Italian. I'm looking for some of the other stuff if it's there. So Raj, what are you drinking now?
Well, this naturally has an eye towards Convivio del Vino because I've been trying to taste more and more of the wines from the producers that are present. But categorically, I drink a lot of sparkling wine from Champagne, and so I, when it comes to still wines, if I want something to cure the thirst, it's usually a white that I'm reaching for, in general. And Christiana Tiberio came to the Palais this year. She happened to be in town. And it was served as a reminder to me that she makes some excellent white wines. Although I know her Chiarsuelo.
No shit, Sherlock.
Yeah, well, as I said, I'm no expert like you.
Raji, give me
wine, Sam.
So I'm busting your
Tiberio.
Raji, I'm in reverence of you. I'm busting your balls. Give me one or two good champagnes that you kind of like to drink. That reoccur.
Oh, that's the hardest thing to ask.
Then don't. I don't want to force you into something. I thought maybe.
Well, it's hard to choose just because I try also not to drink the same wines over and over again. Frankly, my fiance gives me a hard time for that, and for good reason. It's good. It keeps me on my toes. I'll be in Paris tomorrow night, and I am looking forward to tasting a wine from Elise Bougie. Great producer.
Spell for me.
Sort of soulful, dry styles wine. Bougy. The last time I was in Champagne, I ran into her on the last evening that I was there, and was reminded that I tasted her wines a few times. There's a great wine bar in Paris that I love. A dear friend named Pierre Reynaud, who curates a great list along with his partners of champagnes, and I know he has some of her wines on the wine list, so I want to drink one of those.
Is Brian Garcia bringing her wines?
He is.
He is. Okay, I thought so.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then one that's a bit more recurring, just because I love the wines and I really feel value for dollar is pretty spectacular here. I've been drinking a fair bit of the Domaine Pierre Paillard. So Canton and Antoine Paillard. I love their wines and I drink them for a
Agree with you on that. Jeff?
I just looked at my fridge.
Good job.
I have right now in my fridge a De Fermo Don Carlino Chardonnay from Abruzzo, which is interesting. It's one of the oldest planted vineyards of Chardonnay in Italy, and it's really, really stunning, amazing fermented concrete. I love the wines from Abruzzo, and I love that wine in particular, even though it's an international grape. I had for lunch today, I was giving a speech at the Enological School in Alba today, and then we went out to lunch with the professors. So we had Lamondier Bernier's Latitude. Yeah. And then, of course, we drank a Barbaresco from Pierre Busso, which is a producer coming to Convivio.
Nice.
But I drink a lot of Italian wine. Oh, the Savoie is close to where we live. It's about 3 hours away.
Love that.
So I'm really into like Altesse and Jacquer, and kind of exploring the region of the Savoie.
Those are good ones. I didn't mention, but I post these on our social media so people have access. Now, let me just say one thing to both of you guys, and I'm pointing at you more, Raj. If you want to get out of here on time, remember what I said. You got to be spontaneous and quick on these things, all right? So second question, good for both of you because you guys are true wine and food lovers. This is the goofiest question on the list. Raj, favorite wine and food pairing. Not what we think is the best, but what you like.
Well, Jeff got me reminded of how much I love Lambrusco when I first moved back to New York in 2006. After spending a few years bopping around, I remember I would work service at the restaurant I was in at the time, and then late at night I would go to crap, now it's popped out of my head. Jeff, help me. Wine Bar, Ludlow and Rivington, I want to say. Enoteca. Which in its day was such a special restaurant to me because I got a real education in regional Italian wines there. Never starting before midnight, never ending before 4 a.m., never less than 3 bottles a night and a few panini. Very dear friends of mine and people I respect a great deal, the owners of 63 Clinton, Ray and Sam have just opened a restaurant in that space, and so you can go there and drink well again now. After
Wait, so what was the answer?
Lambrusco.
Lambrusco
paired with a spicy panini. So I would always go there and then I would order some fancy Piedmontese wines because that's what I wanted to try. But I would always start with a glass of Lambrusco and their super spicy panini. It was like soppressata and pickled chilies and really good olive oil and not much else.
That is a good one. Jeff, I'm going to ask you when you have time to send me a list of 5 terrific Lambruscos that are somewhat accessible, that you could find them in a store. You can give me all price ranges, but keep value in mind, because I think I want to post that to my listeners too. Now, Jeff, before you answer the question, didn't I plead with you guys to be short on these answers?
I'm ready.
Okay, go.
Dolcetto and brisket, smoked barbecue, Texas style.
Does that go back to your Texas days, or you discover that later?
I can't help it. I can't help.
What is it about Dolcetto that works with that?
It's fruit forward, so it punches through the pepper and the spicy, but then it's got the tannins to really hold up to the fattiness of it. And they're juicy.
Excuse my ignorance here, because I'm just a podcaster, but Dolcetto de what? Or just Dolcetto?
Dolcetto d'Alba or Dogliani, which is the region that's famous for Dolcetto.
Dogliani, Dogliani?
Correct. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
All right. I want to make sure of that. All right. This third question, it could be problematic. It shouldn't, because I don't want you, again, to pick favorites or whatever. I just want you to state places that do well. The question is favorite wine restaurant and/or bar, and maybe just limited to a couple of choices. Jeff, that may be Italy. You may have a favorite in New York. Raj, same thing. I always preface it by saying, if you answer it, it's not your top 1, 2. If you leave people out, it's not on purpose. I'm just looking for good examples of places that have great wine, great food, great vibe, great knowledge, great people. I always say, this is my favorite answer, Pascaline Lepeltier Chambers. Checks every one of those boxes. I'm looking for places like that. Raj, you go first. Anything come to mind? Or you could bow out if you want.
No, it's easy. I'm going to avoid New York because I'm not there right now.
Okay.
And reference right here, I'm in Beaune, France, and one of my favorite places to drink and discover new wines here is a restaurant called Le Soleil in Savigny-les-Beaunes, just a town or so over.
Okay.
Owned by a young woman who's part of the Bees family, Lola Bees,
nice.
And curated extremely well. A nice mix of classic and natural producers. A lot of wines from Spain, a lot of wines from Italy, even a handful of wines from the U.S., but certainly here from France. And she's really good at finding the perhaps unpolished, but gems nonetheless that maybe haven't been discovered everywhere. And I always discover something new and something exciting. And then I don't remember if it's called Osteria or if it's goes by a different name, but in Piemonte, thanks to Jeff's suggestion, I went to Centro Storico and I made fast friends with the owner and quickly realized that we have a lot of friends in common, most of them Burgundians. As I started looking around the room, there are all these photos of Fred Meunier and Jeremy Says from Dujac hanging out there. So I sensed quickly that we had a similitude in terms of taste. And then I asked him to suggest something from Piemonte that I'd never had before, and he brought out 4 bottles and kind of blew my mind. This was last March, a year ago March. And so I put that very high on my list. I've only been the one time, but I will be back.
You got to go back. Jeff?
I'm going to give 3 from here in Piemonte.
Go ahead. I love that.
In Torino, Consorzio.
Spell Enterino, Enterino?
Consorzio, like a C-O-N.
Right.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Okay. Enterino Consorzio.
Yeah. It's the place where kind of it helped kind of ignite the natural wine movement here in northern Italy. It opened about 20 plus years ago.
Wow.
And it's when I want to have like good French, like good natty French wine, that's where I go. And they also make a pretty good steak. The other one is called Ostria Veglio, which is in Lamora. Veglio.
Veglio. Okay.
They were former chefs at Michelin-starred restaurants, and then they were tired of that, and they're really only open for lunch. They only do one dinner service a week, I think, but they make some of the best pleen or agnolotti that I've ever had. And my last, I'm going to just double down with Raj. Centro Storico is one of the greatest places on earth.
Is it?
For food and wine.
So that's, if I get out there, that's a must, right?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right, all good
Alessio and his wife Stefania are two of the most amazing, warm people. And the moment you walk in there, you just feel you're home, and that's what you want out of the places here.
All right, fourth question. The question is favorite all-time wine. When I initially structured this question, and you guys would have been perfect examples for the way I originally structured it, but I changed it. I wanted to know the rarest, most expensive wine you ever drank. And both of you, goddamn it, have been exposed to that. I don't care about that answer anymore. What I care about is tell me that one wine, go to two if you have to, that changed the way you thought about wine, that was a gateway, that is important to this day, changed your thinking, all of that. Can you recall a wine that, answers to all of that, Raj?
I want Jeff to go first this time.
All right, Jeff.
Okay, I'm gonna give you two. Maybe answer your first original question and give you a second one.
Okay, I'm cool on that.
Manny Burke used to organize this like Illuminati group of wine collectors that were focused on Madeira, and there were 16
that's his wheelhouse.
And they did 4 years in a row. They brought 100 wines every time, and they just did single varietal Madeiras. And one time they brought a 1763 Cercial. And 1763 is when the Stamp Act was passed that helped ignite the beginning of the American Revolution. And that wine, just from a historic but then tasting point, I can still taste the wine. I can feel it.
Wow.
That wine, I don't have no idea how much it cost, but it was like a monumental. I think it's the reason you drink wine, is when you have those moments to realize historic opportunities for the world and change. So that was that wine that kind of impacted me that way. And then the other was in 1999, I tried my first real important Barolo, and it was a 1990 Lavinia Sandroni Barolo.
That was the producer?
Yes.
Lavinia Sambaroni?
Sandroni is the producer. And the wine was called Lavinia. And at the time...
So it's Sandroni, and the bottling was Lavinia.
Correct.
I got it. What year was that?
1990 vintage.
Why do you recall that now?
I remember because that's when I worked at this wine shop in Austin, and I remember it just tasting so different and feeling so different than all the other wines, because I was used to selling like California or French wine, and it just hit with a different level of acidity and tannins. But there was I always say that Italian wines hit you in the stomach first and then move to your head, so they're very visceral. And that's what I felt, and that's what kind of helped ignite the flame for Italian passion.
Well, I asked you that earlier. I think you said a Tarazzi or something. I mean, obviously, this is another one. This was, getting on the train to the love of Italian wines. Good one. Raj, you've had plenty of time to give me a short answer. What is it?
You know me better than that, Sam.
Go ahead.
Short answers. Well, listen, as you noted, I've been very lucky to have been able to taste some of the craziest wines in the world. So I'll keep it to Italy, being that Italy's on my mind.
Okay.
The restaurant Maialino, in its period of heyday, mid-teens, I'd say, or early teens, maybe 2016, this might have happened. I was with a group of friends. Your guest from next week, Rajat Par, was the ringleader of this particular band of troublemakers. Pax Malé, who's been on your show, was with us.
Sure.
Daniel was with us. Patrick Capiello was with us. And if I recall, I'm pretty sure Dan Petrosky was with us. And collectively, they know a lot more about these wines than I do. They made a plan, they made a budget. We went to drink a bunch of old Italian wine. And I had truly, specifically Piedmont, I had a mind blowing experience. It was really, really special. And a lot of the producers that I didn't really know very well, I might have known their names, but not their wines very well. The one that blew my mind completely, and again, it references this sort of historical importance. No, it was actually Berlotto, a producer who's Italian.
Yeah.
It was a 1945 Berlotto.
Whoa.
And it was completely stunning. It was the most expensive wine that we had that night, but with 10 of us and drinking several wines, we managed to spend our allowance and then some on it. And I remember going home afterwards and going to sleep, and right before I fell asleep, my then partner asked me, "Where have you been, and why are you so happy? Why are you smiling in your sleep?" And I just said, I have had the most incredible experience with Piedmont. It's the first time I've ever had a wine that transports me in the exact same way and emotion that the vineyard Musigny does. And it was from this producer Berlotto, who I at the time really didn't know very well at all. It was a 1945 Berlotto. And I also woke up the next morning, although I'd brushed my teeth before I went to bed, tasting that wine and dreaming.
In a good way.
About it because I woke up and it was the first thing on my palate, on my mind, and it stayed with me for weeks. It stayed with me for years. I've never seen that bottle since, but I
don't think you will
when I see them in
and Berlotto will be at Convivio, right?
Yes. Clearly didn't make the 45 that I tasted because he's way too young.
So, but Jeff, to your point, he's bringing 4 wines, 2 recent vintages, and he's going to pull out 2 older vintages, so you'll get a chance to taste a little older Berlotto, which is nice.
Correct.
All right, final question. You guys should be great at this. The question is, and then I'll point you to how I want you to answer it. The question is, recommend to me the best wine around 15, 20, 22 bucks retail American. I want you to recommend a red. I want a white. I've selfishly put this question on the list because my kids are, in their late 20s, 30s, and I want to point them towards the best value wines because they can't show up at a party with shitty wines and they can't afford 60 bucks a bottle. So how do I ooh and wow here? Now, that's the setup. Here's where I want you to take this. Best wine around 15, 20, 22 bucks American, red and white, Italian version. So what I'm looking for is the best value to quality wines within anyone at Convivio or outside, because we're supporting Italian wines.
Raj first.
Raj, you go.
How about yeah, sure thing. But how about we just split this up? I'll do white and you do red, Jeff.
Jeff, we could do that, and if you want to add anything, Jeff, you're open to that.
Got it.
Fantastic. I would go to Sicily for that value.
Okay.
I think that there's Grillo that fits in that price category quite comfortably. That can offer tremendous saltiness and minerality, but still some sort of sunniness and warmth. And I find that to be very, very food friendly, delicious, and always a great value.
So Sicily, Grillo, white, that's the variety, right, Grillo?
That's correct.
Okay. Jeff, you want to jump to red and then add anything else?
Yeah, I think Annata Chianti Classico is probably the best quality value ratio for wine right now.
So Eric Asimov is a huge Chianti Classico fan, and he's been on this show. Actually, he's going to kick off the Grape Nation first show every year to talk about the past year and the new year.
That's awesome.
But he talks about what I know Chianti Classico. What is Annata?
Annata is the youngest of the wines. So
okay.
They have it's the one that has the least amount of aging.
So that gives you it's good region, Sangiovese, but that gives you a little value, right?
Exactly. They tend to be fresher. A lot of them don't see any wood. If they do see wood, it's just big wood and just for a little bit of time to kind of round out the edges of the tannins. But I just love them because specifically the ones from Rada and Lamele or Montefiorale, they're the highest altitude ones.
All right, really so slow down there. Rada is R-A-D-A?
D-A, R-A-D-D-A.
DDA. So that's one. Who was the second guy? Because I post this stuff.
So these are regions within Chianti Classico.
Oh, okay. So, Rada's...
in the middle, it's one of the highest altitudes. The highest one, which is on the eastern edge of the region, is called Lamele. L-A-M. O-L-E.
Okay, Lamela.
And then the other one's Monte Fiorale, so like Mountain of Flowers.
Right. So give me a couple of notable producers.
Istine, who will be at Convivio.
Istine?
Correct.
Okay.
She is an amazing producer and a wonderful human being.
Looking forward to that.
That's in Rada. In Lamale, you've got a producer named E, as in the letter I, Fabri, Fabbri. She's making these just really stunning wines, and her nata is 100% Sangiovese. And then in Montefiorale, a family that has history going back to the year 800 called Villa Calcinaya.
Nice. Again, I will post those. Is there any, we can end there, or is there anything you wanted to add to the wine list?
I mean, I could do this for days. Sam.
All right, then stop there, because I got to get you guys out of here. We're going to do two last things. We're going to do a quick weekly wine sip, and then I'm going to do a wrap up, and I need you to, tell everybody where and what to do to get into this. So the last segment's the weekly wine sip. Every week we taste a different wine on air for the weekly wine sip. I talk to a lot of winemakers. It'd be crazy for me not to sit with them and taste their wines and talk with them about it. I asked you guys, pull a wine out that's kind of representative of what Convivio is all about. And I said, make it accessible, reasonable, but cool, because there's a range of wines there. So what you guys sent me was a Chiaro Condello, a Romagna Sangiovese Predapio. Predapio. It's a 22. It's a red wine. And tell me more about this. It's Sangiovese based?
So this is from Emilia Romagna. So think you're in Bologna, and you go further east towards the water, towards the Adriatic. It's 100% Sangiovese. Chiara her family is the Conde estate, which is this larger estate. And she, a few years ago, her father let her kind of parcel off a few hectares of her own. And she started doing her own work and doing some farming. And now the whole estate follows her protocols.
Wow.
But it's minimal intervention, no new oak. And the cool thing about the difference between Romagna Sangiovese and...
I was going to ask you that. And Tuscan, let's say.
What most people think in Tuscan is Romagna DOC's lower in altitude. This area in Predapio has a little more clay-based, mixed with some limestone, but not as much as you find in Tuscany. And so it's a kinder, gentler version of Sangiovese in the terms that the acidities tend to be a little lower, the wines tend to be a little more rounder, with less edges to them, less kind of macchia, which is that kind of herbal, balsamic bay leaf, and more of that cherry forward
fruit,
lush, but then underneath you get this really beautiful earthiness, and there's a joyfulness to the wines, in my opinion.
So I have it in front of me because you sent me a bottle. So I'm going to do a quick rundown, and I want you to comment. The color is kind of a nice, deep, but not brooding, translucent purple. Beautiful color. Sits on on a piece of white paper in the glass. Is nice purple. The nose is kind of what you said. It's there's a red fruit in there. There's cherry. I hate to use the word smooth, but it's a really nice integrated, soft nose and all of that. The mouthfeel, I'm going to tell you that in 1 second, is kind of a medium, medium, not even medium plus, but a good medium. Fills the mouth. The palate is representative of some of the nose stuff, that cherry. It's not too savory. The fruit is really nice and all of that. Would you say that's a fair assessment from a neophyte like me?
You're higher.
Okay. It's really a wonderful wine. I mean, Raj, you were saying it's sort of like a house wine for you. It's not expensive.
It's not expensive. It's kind of rare.
That's the hard part,
for sure.
Getting it.
But Daniel and I are kind of addicted to it.
Yeah, and I think Jeff, this definitely indicates what Convivio is about, who the winemakers, the type of wines, the values, and all that. What's good pairings for wine like this?
A fun pair, if you want to go super kind of classical, but like street foodie, it's called a piadina. So think it's like an Italian tortilla almost that you fill like prosciutto,
nice.
arugula, and some like good melty cheese. It's delicious.
This would work well with it. I mean, the cheese is sharp. Yeah, the arugula is peppery. And you said this isn't an overly tannic wine, but it'll handle it well, right?
Right. In my opinion, yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right on that. All right, so that is the 22 Chiara Condello Romagna Sangiovese Predappio from the Emilia-Romagna region. Thank you for providing that, and it'll probably be at Convivio, right?
It will be.
Okay.
Sure.
All right. Boys, I got to send you on your way, but I got to do a quick wrap up, and I need you to point me towards some information. So if you have a question, suggestion, wine happening, or event, hit me up at sam@thegrapenation.com. That's sam@thegrapenation.com. Listen to the Grape Nation podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your pods. Please subscribe to the Grape Nation and leave a review if you like the podcast. By subscribing, the podcast pops up every week. And wouldn't you like to have this pop up, hear about it, never heard of Convivio, get enthralled by it, then attend, and now you're an Italian wine lover for life? So that's why you should subscribe. Follow us on Instagram at sbenruby and on X at benruby. You can always use the hashtag The Grape Nation to find us on both. We are on Facebook at The Grape Nation. As I mentioned, we will post Jeff and Raj's wine list answers. Pretty deep shit there. So you want to pay attention to that. And I will give you more information on our weekly wine sip, the Chiara Condello, and Jeff has promised me a bonus list of 5 Lambruscos to drink now. All right, guys. So where can we get more information on Convivio? And I'm talking about, where can I buy tickets? I heard a lot of winemakers thrown around. What's the list? There's this dinner, that dinner. I'm confused. How do I tighten all this up?
So find your way to our website, Convivio del Vino, CONVIVIODELVINO.com. You'll see the program. You'll see participating winemakers, information about the chefs, the sommeliers who'll be working with us, and access to contacting us or to buying tickets via Eventbrite, our ticketing platform, which is linked there. You can also ask me any questions you want. My email is linked on our website. You can look under Convivio del Vino, and there's a tab that says Our Festivals and Experiences. That refers, of course, to the French festivals as well. And you can see links to that and find me there. Or you can hit me up on Instagram. It's RAJVINE,
Raj Vine.
And send me a message. And now that I've said that, I'll make sure I'm always checking it so I don't miss it.
Yeah, really. At least for the next few weeks. I've been on
for a couple of weeks, yeah.
I've been on the website many times, obviously prepping for the show and getting information. It's a tight website. There's everything you need to know. There isn't a million of wasted pages. Jeff, we talked about the dinners, and already on the website are the specific wines, the Conternos and all that, the younger generation stuff. That's all there. Talks about the chefs, and there are all links for the tickets, so jump on it. This stuff isn't going to sit around. We have a few weeks left, so think about that.
And if I can just add to that, if you're in the trade, definitely send me a message, and you can find my email via our website. Probably the easiest would be to go to lapollet.com. I do have some packages and discounts for people in the trade as well.
Okay. There is a Convivio Instagram site, right?
There sure is.
Okay. And
you
Jeff,
can learn all about Jeff. He's very prominently displayed.
Your tell me a couple things. Your social media.
It's at Jeff Porter Wine on Instagram and on TikTok, and that's the best way to get a hold of me.
Okay.
And Rajley at Convivio, the website is the best place. There's all the ticketing information But any questions anybody has or wants to ask more about wine and stuff, DM me. And
okay. Jeff, when are you rolling into town?
I come in on April 27th.
Okay, so pretty close to the event. And you're going to hang a few days after, I hope?
I'm going to be there for 2 weeks.
Oh, so you're really hanging. Good for you. Family staying back, or are you bringing them?
Unfortunately, yeah. My daughter's in fifth grade, so
school?
she's got to stay in school, and my wife will stay here. So I'm just rolling solo. But I have my Convivio fam, and I'm excited about that. And it's going to be a great time.
Yeah, this is a good family. You're right about the word family. All right. I will see you guys, at least at the tasting and, maybe before or whatever. So good luck with everything. I want to thank our guests, Jeff Porter and Raj Vadia. I want to thank our engineer, Armin, and everyone at the Heritage Radio Network. I'm Sam Ben-Ruby, and you've been listening to The Grape Nation. The Grape Nation is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network. Food radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org/subscribe.